I'm delighted today to introduce our presenters, Allego CMO, Wayne Saint-Amand, and Allego Senior Manager of Product Marketing, Jake Miller. Wayne is responsible for driving business expansion through Allego's global corporate and product marketing initiatives. A seasoned marketing leader, Wayne has a long track record of accelerating the growth of technology businesses, playing a key role in one IPO and 3 $100 million exits. And Wayne is joined today by Jake Miller, who leads product marketing here at Allego. So Jake offers an experienced and relevant perspective on today's topic. With the intro out of the way, take it away, Wayne.
Craig, thanks very much for that intro. Everyone, thanks for attending today. I can tell you that Jake and I are really excited to cover this topic for you. This is a topic that is absolutely near and dear to our hearts because we in fact, we struggle with these challenges every day. Jake and I and others on our team are responsible for creating content that enables sales, that helps to make that sales team more successful. And what we hear from our peers within Allego and outside of Allego is that it is often a struggle to create content that sales is going to love and that they're going to use, they're going to find value in, rather than just sort of paying lip service to being thankful for that marketing content. So Jake, you ready to jump right in?
Ready.
All right, let's go. All right, we're going to start here with some sort of core challenges that we see in the industry. Most of this data comes from industry analysts, and this is sort of the plague that's hitting all of us in marketing. First stat here is that 70% of enablement content is never used. When we see this, we sort of cry a little bit inside because we know how hard we all work to build content that we feel is the right content to help sales win. So to see this stat, we can see just what a big challenge it is across the industry. Also, 68% of sales leaders say that reps are ineffective using digital content. And then our final stat here, and this is probably the most troubling because it speaks to the external challenge that reps have, is that 67% of buyers that were surveyed say reps aren't adding value in the sales process. And look, we know that the content is designed to make the reps as smart as possible and to deliver as much value to buyers as possible. So these three stats they're quite troubling. When we saw these, when Jake and I saw these stats, we said to ourselves, boy, we have to build a webinar to help our peers understand how to do this better, at least take a solid stab at it. So Jake, here we go. So what we're going to cover today, we're going to cover many things, but they're going to hit on these four agenda points here. The idea of co-creation with regard to content, co-creating content, distributing content, content activation, and content tracking. Okay, so these are going to be our four kind of primary topics that we'll go through in attacking this challenge. Before we do that, we always like to get a sense for how our audience is doing on some of these measures. So we're going to launch a poll. So I think, Craig, you're gonna help us with this poll, right? All right, I see that it has been launched. So please take a moment and fill in your answer to this poll. What percentage of marketing authored sales content do you estimate that your sales team is actually using? Most of it, about half, very little, none of it, not sure. Let's see if this audience matches up to the data that we saw earlier. What do you think, Jake? You think we've got sort of high achievers here, middle players, or folks that are really struggling?
I think we've got high achievers.
All right.
But you never know. It's not necessarily a matter of achievement either. It also, there's so many factors that are that are beyond just the effectiveness of the content that you're creating.
Yeah.
as to whether there's so, and that's part of what we're going to talk about, is that whole process of thinking about content in terms of like steps along a life cycle. And you could have the most amazing first step where it's creating, and then you could have an amazing system for delivering it for enabling your rep to deliver to the prospect, but maybe the step where you're releasing it to them and helping them understand the value of it, maybe that step is broken, and then that the whole thing becomes shot at that point. So it'll be interesting to see.
So Craig, are you able to display the results, or there we go. Fantastic. Okay, let's see. What percentage? Poll results. Interesting. So 6% are those kind of high achievers among us, the folks that the sales team's actually using it. About half of content, 31%. The vast majority of you at 56%, very little. So that's obviously that's disappointing, but it's one of the reasons you're here, right? During this webinar, we're going to try and break down some of the steps that you can take to get your content to be, number one, valued, because if it's not valued, it won't get used. Number two, used, distributed properly, and then tracked, so you have the right metrics to understand how much of it is being used, how can it get better, how can you optimize it, those sorts of things. So pretty revealing to see how much opportunity there is out there in our audience around this content. All right, let's continue moving along. All right, we're going to jump in with our first core topic, co-creation, right? Content starts by creating it, right? And how you create it and the way that you jump into it is so important for making it relevant and perceived as valuable by the sales team. So the key question here is, how do you ensure that your team being the marketing team, perhaps it's the product marketing team, the content marketing team, the titles here aren't important, but someone on your team within marketing is likely creating content designed for sales use, right? So how do we know? How can you ensure that your team is creating the most impactful content for sales? And when we think about content creation, it does get produced on a life cycle, right? And one of the most important things that you can do is to create a content life cycle that incorporates field collaboration and learning. What do we mean when we say field collaboration and learning? We know that sales is at the tip of the spear in terms of really understanding and interacting with the market, because they are talking to prospective customers, existing customers who are expanding their implementations of your solution. Whatever the case may be, they are speaking with the market. And they, as much as we might as marketers think we know the market really well, sales really knows the market better than we do, and they are the most current. The sense of recency on the information, the data that they're collecting is so much better from a marketing perspective. So if you are building content in a vacuum simply because sales has said, hey, I don't have a tool that does this, can you build me something that says this? And if you go off and you build that without an early sense of collaboration with the field, you're probably going to be a little bit off as you distribute that. And the more off you are in that content, the less likely you are able to see that sales will use that content. The other thing to think about, so this is this idea of co-creation, right? Where you have to think of sales as your creation partner, not just sales is my customer, but sales is actually who I'm going to work very closely with to make sure that when I release that thing, the first time I release it, it's going to be far more on target than if I go and build it in a vacuum. The other thing to think about when you're thinking about content creation is this idea of agile content. Agile content, it can absolutely often be more valuable to sellers than formal content. So what's agile content, you're asking? Well, things like sales talk tracks. So when you release a new presentation for sales to use to represent your company, your product, your solutions, it'd be great if you could do a recording that you make available within a sales content management system that talks about how to deliver this presentation, that actually shows a delivery. What does good look like when sales is delivering this, right? What if sales themselves could record any information and learnings that they've received through their sales pitch process about competitors, right? Up to the minute competitive intelligence is often an incredibly powerful sales tool that you can then use as intelligence as you build sales tools that counteract those competitors and what you've learned about them. And then also personalized videos. You as a marketer or your sales team, giving them, empowering them with the ability to, in an agile way, to create their own personal video-based content is going to be really useful and really helpful to them when you think about content creation. Oh, I think I jumped ahead. No, I did not. Jake, you're up next on distribution.
Okay, excellent. So this is the kind of the next part of this life cycle, right? When it's time to now, we've gotten feedback from sales. A key theme you're going to see throughout is staying close to the customer interaction between the sales rep and the buyer throughout every one of these steps. The last step, it's in the creation process. So staying close, having your ear to the ground, or whatever the expression is, having a pulse on the interaction between the buyer and seller, understanding that so that you're creating really impactful content, grabbing content from the field, that's empowering salespeople to create that. Now, here is where we're thinking about, okay, how do we've created the content, whether it be white paper, case study, internal facing stuff like battle cards, strategy guides, FAQs. How do we get it into their hands at the exact right time? The old paradigm we've always used is like, if you build it, they will come type of thing, like where we just kind of release it to sales, put it into a folder and say, here's where you go and check it out. But now, of course, we've got so many more avenues to reach them in the different applications that they're working in, reach them, based on the situations that they're about to walk into, and so that's kind of this part of the process. So it's thinking in terms of you've got your content creation engine. Now you've got to think about how are you getting this distributed to your sales team. So the first step, start with a taxonomy. This phase of distribution, again, if we think about how do we get as close as we can to the customer, to the buyer interaction between the seller and the buyer, to have that influence our strategy for distribution. Well, starting with a taxonomy that is mapped to the sales process. So think about the steps in your process, or map to your sales process as well as map to your key kind of sales situations or personas. Right, if you're selling to businesses, right, maybe there are 3 kind of key or 4 key industries that you sell to. Partnering with whoever you're considering for a vendor. I assume most folks here are probably considering some kind of a sales content technology. Partnering with your vendor to understand, what can you help me with as far as what are best practices for how to organize this content? Do we organize it by industry if we're selling to businesses? Do we organize it, make it available in like a playbook kind of fashion by the different uses or use cases of the product, whatever it might be. So starting with that taxonomy, and then again, like I mentioned, mapping that to your every step in your sales process. That starts to kind of get into the second point here with the playbooks, right? The playbooks and the taxonomy are really kind of the first 2. It's about, every step in the process. If you talk to your sales leaders, there are what you could call exit criteria. There's a set of criteria that the reps have to check off before they can move that opportunity to the next stage in the CRM. Map your content to those. Make sure that you've got content pieces to address those. Maybe there's always some key objection at each part of the process, and you will find it in that exit criteria. And so map your content pieces. Make sure that you're surfacing that content in the CRM based on that. Setting up a way for them to browse, right? This is critical because salespeople have a natural interest in understanding what is available to them as far as tools, more than most roles in a company, because salespeople are so self-motivated. because that they'll directly make more money the more that they know about the tools at their disposal, right? So they want to go and browse. They want to see. So make that easy again, and that's going to be based on your taxonomy, how you set things up. What is going to be the most likely? What's the first thing that a salesperson in our company is going to be thinking when they go to search for something, and make that available in browsing. This recommendations and personalizing, again, that, and then the next piece here, the deal appropriate content in CRM. These two are kind of intertwined. The recommendations using AI and using CRM data. This is, again, this is how you can really get right down at the ground level. And even in surfacing the right content based on the situation. You see a rep is you see this one piece of content, when it gets used at a certain part of the sales process, this stage, it goes 20% faster, right? Because you have all these CRM metrics, map that, surface that content at that point. Even using technologies like artificial intelligence now for through conversation intelligence, where all of our salespeople are on calls where it's video conference. So now you've got all that data surfacing content based on the topics being discussed. And then these last three pieces here, predictive search, again, just making sure you're covering all your bases. If the salesperson knows exactly what they want, to make it easy for them to be able to search that. They all know Google. This is what's been, the kind of the paradigm that they all know outside of work. Mobile access is critical. Even in the pandemic, we've seen the mobile usage has barely gone down. It's about the same. We would have thought it would be less mobile because people are at home, but people are still using mobile just as much. That's critical. And then digital sales rooms, giving them a way to organize. If they're sending 5-10 pieces of content throughout a several month period when they're selling, give them a centralized kind of microsite type of platform to place all of those assets in, and you can start to really control that experience between them and the buyer. And again, that's just another mode of distribution right there, giving them that whole setup to do their virtual selling with that content. So yeah, that's just kind of a real high level overview of all the things you want to be thinking about with distribution.
Thanks, Jake. This section is so important because it's about kind of two critical things, right? You can produce great content, you can co-create content with your selling partners to make it relevant and useful, but if they can't find it, or if they can't distribute it well, in other words, getting the market to find it through their efforts, it's pointless, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. Let's move on to content activation. This is often where marketers can fall flat, right? We spend so much time upfront building the content, and we sort of, I think collectively, want to just sort of throw it over the wall. Hey, you asked for it, here it is, right? Drop it in the content management system, send it out over email, and then it just is sort of lost, right? And that's where I think we saw in our polling data so many folks struggling with the fact that most of the content really isn't being used. And there's a variety of reasons, right? First, sales doesn't think it's very good because maybe you haven't co-created with them. Second, maybe you've got distribution problems. They can't find it very well. And then third, it's maybe within marketing, you haven't spent enough time activating that content. I know Jake and I spend a ton of time activating the content that we produce. Actually, I would say, Jake, it's fair to say we spend half of our time creating content and half of our time activating that content. Would you say that's fair?
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So if you're not thinking from a time management perspective, if you think about your content continuum, about half your time needs to be spent on activation in order to be really truly useful to sellers. All right, let's dig into this a little bit more. Never forget this point. The greatest sales content is useless without a seller that understands how to use it properly, right? And so many marketers and so many sellers fall down right here. Thanks for the content, I'm not sure exactly how to use it. Or thanks for the content, I'm going to go right off into the sunset and use this, and then they misuse it, right? Or they under utilize the asset because they weren't really sure about the creator's intent, the author's intent behind it. So from a content activation standpoint, you really want to combine these ideas. You want to combine learning, content, and collaboration in order to fully activate your content, right? The other thing that you want to do, and you can use technology to help you with this, is that the knowledge connected to the assets, and when I say the knowledge, I mean it's the what good looks like content that is the context for your content, how to use it, that has to be available in such a way that the seller can access it in their time of need. Every seller has a moment of need in their sales cycle where they need particular pieces of content to tell a particular story, reinforce a point that they're making. And I can guarantee you that they won't remember the 90 days ago launch that you did, the webinar that you did talking about this, or the email that you sent. You have to have it in a system that is very easy for them to quickly do a Google-like search and find it. Or when they're in their CRM system, whether it be like Salesforce or some other CRM system, and they're in their opportunity, does the system serve up content that's appropriate for their opportunity right within Salesforce? Is it contextually aware of what's going on in the deal and serving up content in their moment of need that's going to be valuable to them, right? You want to try and find systems that will support you in this way, because sellers rarely proactively absorb everything they want and need, right? They're going to sort of ask you when their hair is completely on fire about something, and you want to use a system that can get ahead of that and deliver the content, the learning information, and the co-created content that you built through collaboration, again, when they need it. And the other thing is, you have to think when you're creating your content about the fact that sellers need to understand each asset's value at certain stages in the sales process, right? So think about your sales cycle. Think about the various needs. Could be industry-specific needs, role-specific needs, funnel depth-specific needs that the sellers have, and map your content to those things. That's going to help activate it in the seller's mind and get that content used and used effectively. A bit more. So you heard me talk a little bit about what good looks like, right? That's a phrase that Jake and I use a lot around here at Allego, because we're not just, when we're building our PowerPoint presentations, for example, for the sales team, we're not just sort of typing our talk track into the speaker's notes section. We're actually recording, either Jake or I or some other members of our team, recording us delivering the presentation, emphasizing certain points, providing context, sort of the story behind the story associated with these things. So when they go and deliver it, they understand the creator's intent. They understand the story behind the story with those things. And recording that talk track, making it available, and making it available in a way that, again, when the seller has the need for that thing, they can quickly find it, access it, review it in a few minutes, and then put it to use live with the prospect is so incredibly important, right? The other thing that is, and we'll get to a specific technology in a minute that can help deliver what I'm about to say, is this idea of a real life example of a top rep using that particular content in the field. Oftentimes, sellers are delivering the content in the form of a conversation, a call, a recorded Zoom call where they're talking to the prospect. And you can see from that recording many times that a prospect is really excited about what the rep is saying, or something is just really connecting with them and resonating. Capturing that recording and attaching it to your presentation makes, again, it brings it to life for sellers. We all know that sellers to some extent respect marketing. They're thankful for the work that we do on their behalf, but they also know that we're not sellers. And oftentimes when we try to guide them, they ignore us because we're not fighting the same battles. We're not in the arena fighting the battle with them, right? We're on the outside of it. But if they see an example of one of their peers doing great things with the content that you've created, it wins them over, right? And your whatever you choose as your technology to help you with this should allow you to capture those in-field uses of content and use that accompanying context along with your content to activate it. Really, really powerful. Same idea here in terms of a win story. Now, I mentioned a minute ago I would touch on a technology that's available. Many of you maybe have heard of a sort of a technology, a solution out there called conversation intelligence. And just very simply defined, conversation intelligence is usually some sort of a solution, a set of tools that allows you to take recorded calls that sellers are making, interacting with prospects, put those into the system, and then analyze those calls using automated transcription and artificial intelligence technologies to find the good places and the bad places in that conversation. What was going well, what wasn't going well. There's sort of like sentiment analysis based on the words used. There's talk time, for example. Like if your rep is speaking 70% of the time and the prospect's only speaking 30% of the time, the rep is probably speaking way too much, right? You should listen a heck of a lot more than you talk, right? But the important thing from a marketing perspective, apart from just seeing general seller performance in that pitch conversation, is really having the opportunity to see how your content is being used live in the real world with a representative of the market, right? A prospect on the other end of the line. If you watch 10 of these a quarter, your ability as a marketer to really understand what's going on in the market, what's going to resonate and what's not, just absolutely goes through the roof. Jake, I'm sure that you've experienced this multiple times as you've watched our sellers' recorded calls. It's given you ideas for how you can augment the presentations we're building and the content we're building for them. Is that fair?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's the primary mode of learning. I mean, besides having your, you've got your relationships with individual reps on the team, and you do your post-decision interviews, hopefully, where you're talking to prospects after they buy or after they don't buy. But this is just like being able to, I used to have to shadow. I used to have to say, hey, can I join this call and listen in? And then you'd have to schedule it. Now it's just like, I can be just like sitting, having my breakfast. It's like a little before, it's before 9, and I can be on my mobile and just like, let me listen to like, 20 minutes of a call. We just launched this presentation last week. I want to hear this rep and how did they deliver it? And how did the prospect react to it? And that brings that voice of the customer right up front, voice of the interaction. You can see it right there. And it's a really powerful source of intel.
And we can, the cool thing is we can sample from literally every conversation that our sales team is having with the market. And when we watch those recordings, we can speed them up. So we can watch them at 1.5 or 1.75 speed. So suddenly, a 30-minute call becomes an 18-minute call, and we can absorb the whole thing that much more quickly, get a wider sample of what's really happening in the market. And it's there are a lot of things that are not so good about the pandemic. The good thing is we have a greater ability as marketers, if we leverage technology, if we leverage some of these digital mechanisms to really better understand what's going on, because so much more, we can be aware of so much more than the before time when a lot of pitches happened face to face, and you had to be in the room in order to learn from those things, or you got your insights secondhand through some filter. You get a loss of fidelity. Now you can learn so much because of great technologies like conversation intelligence. So that's another way to think about, how am I going to collaborate with sales without taking up a lot of sales time and really understand what's going on in the market. This is a tool that can really accelerate that for you, that doesn't present any additional burden on the seller's part. You can do this on the background, and then suddenly, magically, it's like you know the market as well as the seller does because you're experiencing it along with them. Okay, we're going to transition to another important aspect of building content that your sellers are going to love. Jake, I think you're up next with tracking.
Yes. So yeah, this is this is where kind of the rubber meets the road. Obviously, this is an area that so many marketers struggle with. We've, historically, again, using a system where you've either set up a portal, like an intranet for the salespeople to download their content, or you've got a drive, like a shared drive system, like a SharePoint or Google Drive. And but the thing is, salespeople download something to their desktop, and and they start using it, and you have no sense for how, and for sense for what is it working. Where is it? What is working about it? Are a lot of salespeople really super interested in it, so they're clicking on it, but then maybe only a small fraction of them actually turn around and use it with a prospect? Wouldn't that be great to know, right? Wouldn't that tell you something about that piece of content? Or maybe they all use it and maybe the prospects aren't clicking on it, right? So these kinds of things are really important. You think about, you've got, kind of the way we like to think, all that stuff that I just talked about is really the quantitative side of tracking content. Another part of the other kind of crucial part is mapping all of this to our CRM data on how our sales reps are doing, which pieces of content we talked about mapping content to the sales process. Well, let's be able to now through systems that you've got today with the dedicated sales content system, you can now tie that to the speed at that stage of the sales process. So you can look and see of all of the reps who went through that, or for all the deals where that phase of the process moved a lot faster, were there any patterns with pieces of content that were being used? Maybe one piece of content, if you use it in this part of the sales process, or if a rep used it over this period of time, it increased the speed. Or maybe if using this piece of content, if you look at all of the wins and of all the pool of wins, you can see that the ones where this piece of content was used in throughout the sales process, or these couple of pieces, the average sale price was significantly higher, right? So whatever these things are, tying all of that to business outcomes, that's kind of half the puzzle. The other half that we don't see a lot of folks talking about, that plays into some of these technologies that we're talking about with conversation intelligence, with agile content capture and creation, and enabling salespeople to share feedback more, in a more rich qualitative way, is the other half. It's this qualitative piece, being able to see how are the salespeople actually delivering the presentation in an actual customer interaction. How are they? What are the slides that they really stay a long time on and have really rich conversation around with the prospect? Maybe there's a certain point in one of the slides in the new deck that you put out that prospects all start asking a lot of questions around, right? You can start to now get this qualitative view on how sales content is being used, and that is absolutely critical. It gets down into the kind of, okay, now we can set a trigger on when this topic of conversation comes up in a sales call. Let's ping that rep afterwards with the right case study that they should be sending, that we've seen works really well. And we get that qualitative that qualitative input from directly listening in the point of sale. Like that, the qualitative side of things, I can't stress it enough. I mean, I'm sure everyone on the call has felt the pain of being feeling like, as the marketer, we're not like in a in a sales role, right? Or in a client services role, or in a sales development role where we're interfacing with customers and prospects. Like we don't get that direct FaceTime. It feels like you're kind of stuck inside, and everybody else on these other teams are like outside where the action's at, and we're kind of stuck. This is like, you know, having this, like, getting that through line to the actual customer interaction is so critical. It just increases the relevance of every single thing that you do. So,
all right.
Yeah.
Fantastic. These are all incredibly important points with regard to tracking, and your point, Jake, that like we should not think about this too narrowly is absolutely critical. I think as marketers, we are drowning in quantitative data, in numbers and charts, right? But we don't have the opportunity to sample and act on enough qualitative data, qualitative experiences that are more, frankly, about the real world, right? Not just what's happening in systems and creating numbers that go up and down, but what's really happening in the real world, things that you can observe, right? And it's the combination, when we think about content, it's the combination of both the qualitative and the quantitative that actually creates the best outcome, and that helps you optimize in a way that's ultimately going to be really useful to the seller. All right, let's move on. All right, so when we think about content management, sales content management, all of these things here on the left-hand side, these are all sort of table stakes, right? Just about every vendor out there with a solution is doing some form of these things: syncing, tagging, organizing, versioning, sharing, tracking, right? These are the basics of kind of content storage and management and finding and delivering these things, right? So when we say content management is table stakes, is it you should be doing these things, right? As a marketer, working with your sales enablement team or other members who are responsible for getting this content to the sellers so they can deliver it with the field. But the real sort of booster rocket on this whole process is this idea of delivering content with context. This is your accelerator, right? The how-to information, the what good looks like information associated with your content will massively drive up both the usefulness of the content to sales and the applicability of it in their sales cycle. And they're just going to feel better about using the content. Many of you are probably saying, well, I do tell the sales team how to deliver it. But my guess is you're doing that at a point in time. Around a launch, for example. A launch is an event, a date-based thing, right? Over the course of a week, you unveil a set of materials, and you probably via a Zoom call or a webinar are unveiling things broadly to a sales team. Here's all this stuff, here's how to use it, here's how to think about it, here's your context. And then you go away and you say, my job is done. I've done my job. I've handed this off. I've told them how to use it. The problem is that many sellers won't have any need for that content immediately, which means a lot of that, they'll just simply forget about it. They'll forget you ever gave it to them and that you told them how to use it. We all know we've had those instances where we've dealt with a sales team member and we know we have supplied them everything they've asked for 3 weeks ago, and it's like we never even had the conversation, right? So we have to factor that. We have to factor for that in our systems, in how we make sales content available, the kinds of systems that we choose, the kinds of technology decisions that we make around sales content management. To factor for this, it's this aspect of it's got to be available to them and valuable in the moment of need for the seller. And you not only have to deliver the content you've created, but the context surrounding how to use it and why it's valuable. If you can nail those things, in addition to all the kind of checkbox table stakes items here on the left, you're really going to be in a position where you're creating content that sales will love and that they will use, right? So think about those things that we covered: co-creation, distribution, activation, and tracking. But keep in mind that content with context is your #1 accelerator when solving for this problem. All right, Jake, anything to add before we move on to some questions?
Yeah, just that the making sure that you're delivering it in a way that's really easy for them to consume. Like we're huge advocates for using video in this approach,
Yeah.
right? And one of the things that we see organizations across the board who we work with, it's like product marketers, you've got the ability to, you've got all this knowledge, right? Wayne, you said about how like we spend half our time spent on the activation side and then the other half on the creation, right? So like activation could be, we running a bi-weekly, a video kind of podcast type of thing where you send out as a product marketer, you take 20 minutes, put together a quick video running through, here's the key kind of content pieces that we've come out with over the last couple of weeks. Here's why. Here's a couple of nice talking points. Just want to run this through it and let you know, blah, 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 and talk a little bit, give them a little bit of context, and send that video out to the sales team. And it's, keep it short, 5 minutes, whatever, or two minutes, whatever. And you'll be shocked at how much, they start to gravitate towards it. And I mean, we've even seen, we do a thing internally. We have this thing that's, we play like a little prank on the sales team where we call it Jake's Take, right? Where it's my, I'm our product marketing leader. And so going through and we take something from one of their desks, right? This is kind of pre-pandemic. We've modified it with like electronic gift cards and stuff, but we will go and we'll swipe something from the sales team, and then they have to watch, and we tell them at the end of the video whose item we've taken, and then you've got to ask a question in the Q&A timeline, to get your item back, right? So it's like making it fun like that. But that's how you can start to really. I can tell you, every new hire who joins says to me, wow, Jake, I feel like I feel like I know you already, because I'll talk to a lot of the new sales reps, the new SDRs and stuff. And they're like, I feel like I know you because I've seen your face just floating around in all these videos that you put out. You're just putting out like little 2 to 5 minute videos, just giving context about stuff. And then it shows up at the point of need for people. And then you don't have to show up to a million meetings, right? This is how you can get your expertise and this whole side of your subject matter expertise out into the minds of all the people who are going to really be the ones who can put it into action. So
great points, Jake. Really great points. And we know inside of Allego that these work because we're practicing these things ourselves as product marketing practitioners and sales enablement practitioners. All right, Craig, I believe you are going to manage questions for us. Why don't we give the audience a couple of minutes to add questions to the question box in their webinar interface. Before we get to those, 2 kind of reminders or things to point out. Over here on the right-hand side of this slide, you see the CMO's Guide to Sales Enablement. This is a free ebook. It's available on allego.com, just allego.com/CMO. There's a lot of content, free content, that's designed to be helpful. Yes, of course, it's from Allego, and we build a product that will, help you do better in this space. But we're primarily, as we create our content for the market, we're really trying to be helpful and educational, informative, and occasionally even entertaining. So head over to allego.com to the resources section. You'll find this ebook as well as a lot of other content, videos, case studies, a lot of things that you can use to just get better yourself as a professional. And then one more heads up, you don't want to miss this session from Andre Black, our Chief Product Officer. He's an amazing speaker, and he's going to be talking about the state of sales enablement technology, what's in store for the year to come, 2022. As you might imagine, we work with hundreds of the top companies, global companies across the world. So our sample size for understanding, what are companies looking for, and our vision about how to put that all together, and look at tech generally as well as what's coming from Allego, is pretty substantial. So we're going to be talking about that on November 17th. You can register at allego.com/2022. All right, Craig, do we have some questions that Jake and I can field?
Yeah, we sure do. Thanks for that great presentation. And if you haven't asked a question, it's not too late. You can do that now. We have a question from Nathan. Do you recommend having the sales cycle education intertwined into training material or separate?
Oh, that's a really good question. So I have, Jake, do you have a take on it? Do you want me to jump in? How do you want to handle it?
Yeah, I think I can probably take it. I think that this, so having sales cycle education intertwined into training material. So I'm assuming that means like training materials that are designed for aspects of the for stages of the sales process. And we absolutely believe so. I mean, making sure that everything that you're you're enabling your sales team on. I mean, this gets back to the kind of the theme that we've been really harping on. It's this notion that it's kind of a continuous enablement approach where it's it's not a one and done activation, right? Usually companies think, so many of us, think in terms of, okay, we're going to launch something. Let's do, we'll hold a session and we'll take questions and we'll help them get the context. But this is, now this is, you should be thinking in terms of surfacing these things at all the different points in the sales process, because we have the ability to do that. We've got the channels now to actually access a rep and put something in front of them right before they're going to go into a certain scenario, right before they walk into a call around this certain topic area. So now you can absolutely, I mean, we think in terms of, when we launch something, we think about what can we surface to them at the point of need. Maybe it's we launch a certain new message and we know 80% of the time they're going to be talking to this couple personas. We train them on that in the upfront, but then we might not train them on some of the other ancillary personas that they may that are still relevant, but that they may only encounter a smaller percentage of the time. We'll take a 2 to 3 minute explainer video and make sure that that's surfaced at the point of need when they're about to walk in to talk to one of these other personas, right? So there, we just reduced the time that we're spending on having to pull them out of the field to educate them, and we're making those training materials show up at that point in the sales cycle. So yeah, that's a great question.
Thank you, Jake. We have a question from Sonia. How do you handle sensitivity around taking salespeople off the phones? Any minute they're collaborating with marketing, they may be hurting their chances of hitting quota.
Yeah, I can. Thanks, Greg. I can take that one. So Sonia, this is a great question. I think it's something that, look, I'm the CMO. I work very closely with our head of sales. I collaborate with him. We meet weekly, so multiple times per quarter. And we are always thinking about time, right? There's only so much time, and the more time that we occupy with one thing, we don't get to spend time doing other things. And he's very aware of the pain of devoting too much time towards marketing and marketing collaboration. The beautiful thing, and this you have to change your thinking. You have to don't think in the traditional way, right, where everything is a synchronous meeting, a synchronous conversation, right? If you use technology properly, you can have asynchronous conversations, and you can leverage sales activities that are already happening. So again, think about that conversation intelligence technology, where every single Zoom call or phone call with a prospect is being recorded. So instead of meeting with a salesperson a couple of hours a quarter times however many salespeople you need to talk to get the information and distill what's important, you as a marketer can watch as many recorded sales calls as you want at 1.5 or 2x speed. So you don't have to spend the same amount of time because you're watching those calls at a higher speed, distilling what you will and coming up with very specific questions. So you only need 30 minutes a quarter with that sales reps, because you've absorbed that rep's calls, you've absorbed that rep's or series of reps interactions with the market, and you've formed a very specific set of questions. So you can use all of that asynchronous information to collect, distill, have a point of view that you can have one short meeting to test all of your assumptions, get aligned, and then off you go with your content building. And obviously, it's not all of those things in sequence, in parallel. They're happening out of sequence and in a non-parallel fashion. But the point is you can do a lot asynchronously, leveraging what the sales reps are already doing, not interrupting their flow nearly as much as you would if you had to do everything in a synchronous live meeting fashion. So that's one of the ways that we tackle it at Allego, using our own platform, which is super helpful both to us and to the sellers in terms of how we consume time.
Perfect. Thank you. We have time for probably another question or two here. Jamie is asking, and I think you just answered the first part, what cadence should CROs and CMOs meet? And I believe you said you meet weekly with George. And then yes. the next question attached to that was, what does the agenda look like? Oh boy,
that's it's all over the place, really. You know, I think probably the thing that we spend the most time on consistently is where are the bottlenecks, right? In the aspects of, like, in the points where our two business areas intersect, you've got people, right? People and processes that are working together, ostensibly anyway, working together. And oftentimes when you jam people and processes together, you do hit bottlenecks, right? You hit areas that are open for a lot of, or need a lot of, performance optimization. So I think in our conversations, we spend a lot of time like working through the bottlenecks, both identifying them and figuring out how do we solve them, or who do we need to get involved, or what technology do we need to apply to solve those bottlenecks. So it's kind of like, hey, let's just continuously chip away and continuously get better as we have these conversations.
Awesome. Okay, and last question is from Liz. She asked, how do you begin creating a peer-to-peer sharing culture in an organization that's never had it? Because a lot of what you guys have talked about is around this, you know, agile content and capturing video. So what do baby steps look like to get started?
Jake, this is a perfect one for you. You're doing this right now.
Yeah. Yep. So the first thing to do is, you know, facilitate it. There are ways that you can start to, instead of just relying on peer, sales reps to talk to one another. I mean, you can start to go in and capture some of the stuff that they capture, their knowledge, and then you route it to another person in their flow, going into a similar situation, right? So this is how you can start getting folks used to that. And it might be, hey, we release a new couple of slides with some nice messaging around it, and we do a quick certification where, instead of just releasing the slides to the sales team with a talk track, we might even say, hey, here's a talk track, video with the talk track, us walking through what we think it would be. What can, everybody just shoot us back a 2-minute video of how you would deliver it. And it's right within the video. It's like, click here, and they don't have to think about who to send it to. All they have to do is one click, record themselves, and then hit send, and it goes to the right person, right? Now you've got a bunch of videos coming in of different salespeople talking through their iteration on the messaging, right? Now that's so valuable. So then you can say, okay, this person here, Brandon, his messaging was really stellar, or Devin, her messaging was like amazing. This is exactly how we want people to speak to it. Okay, let's turn around and take those couple videos. Maybe there's a couple different examples to suit different reps' style, and let's put those in the playbook. So now other reps are going to go access that deck, and there's a couple examples from different peers how to do it. That starts to get people into that mode of like, hey, I have access to the information from other sellers. And then it starts to just kind of take off, and then you make it real easy for them to capture insights when they walk out of a call. You know, you'd be surprised when you lower that bar for salespeople to make it really, really easy for them. You know, one click, I can capture some competitive intelligence and share it with my team. And then now their video's popping up in a recommendation feed somewhere. And so now everybody's capturing and sharing content to the system. And then you're seeing yourself show up in the recommended. You know, it's a similar paradigm to, you know, social media and, you know, things like that, where you get the value from the system, and then it drives you to you know, put it forth. But the key is, you know, you start with, there's so many different ways to facilitate this process centrally, and that's where you got to start.
Perfect. Thank you guys, and thanks everyone for joining us today.